Kate dropped her basket of shellfish and set out for the village. Arriving there, so out of breath that she could only point to the direction of the shore. The women were cooking supper, but all of them stopped and gathered around her, waiting for her to speak. A school of white bass. Okay, now a school in the fish community does not mean like going to school or public school. A school of fish is like a tribe of fish or a gathering of fish, but they call it a school of fish, and I don't know why they call it, but that's like another word which I tell you means more than one thing. Where, everyone asks. That's the question. See, where, that's how I do. Where is always before a sentence, like, where is in the category of who, what, when, and where. Those are all like the W's. But there's also how, but that's like the exception of the W rule. Who, when, where, and how, and that what is another one. On the rocks, a dozen of them, perhaps more than a dozen. Before Ulape finished speaking, we were running towards the shore, hoping that we would get there in time, that the fish had not flopped back into the sea, or that a chance wave had not washed them away. We came to the cliff and looked down. The school of white bass was still on the ledge, glistening in the sun. But since the tide was high and the biggest waves were already lapping at the fish, there was no time to lose. Then two women carrying a single fish, for they were all about the same size and heavy, we lifted them up the cliff and brought them home. There was enough for everyone in our tribe for supper that night and the next, but in the morning two alouettes came to the village next to speak to my father. You have fish, one of them said. Enough only for my people, my father answered. You have 14 fish, the alouette said. 7 now because we ate 7. Yeah, from 7 you can spare 2. There are 40 in your camp, my father replied, and more than that of us. Besides, you have your own fish, the dried ones that you brought. We tire of that kind, the alouette said. He was a short man who only came to my father's shoulders, and he had small eyes like black pebbles and a mouth like the edge of a stone knife. The other alouette looked much like him. You are hunters, my father said. Go and hunt your own fish if you are tired of what you are now eating. I have my people to think of. Captain Orloff will hear that you refuse to share the fish. That's like, I think, like in a threatening tone, because this is like an argument happening. Like it's leading to an argument. You can almost like foresee that. And another word for foresee is predict. Remember, I told you that. Yes, tell him, my father said, but also why we refuse. The alouette grunted to his companion, and the two of them stalked off on their short legs across the sand dunes that lay between the village and the camp. We ate the rest of the white bass that night, and there was much rejoicing. But little did we know, as we ate and sang, and the older men told stories around the fire, that our good fortune would bring trouble to GHALAS-AT. I don't know what that's mean? The wide beds of kelp which surround our island on three sides come close to the shore and spread out to the sea the distance of the leaves. In these beds, even on the days of the heavy winds, the alouettes hunted. They left the shore at dawn in their skin canoes, so even their canoes are made of skin, and did not return until night, towing after them the slain otter. The sea otter, when it's swimming, looks like a seal, but it is really very different. It has a shorter nose than a seal, small webbed feet instead of flippers, and fur that is thicker and much more beautiful. It is also different in other ways. The otter likes to lie on its back in the kelp beds, floating up and down to the motion of the waves, sunning itself or sleeping. They are the most playful animals of the sea. If they're the most playful animals of the sea, then dolphins aren't the most playful. I always thought it was the dolphin that was the most playful. I know you did too. It was these creatures that the alouettes hunted for their pelts. From the cliff, I could see the skin canoes starting here and there in the kelp boards, barely skimming the water, and the long spears flying like arrows. That's what they hunted with, spears and arrows and all that things like in the museum I'll show you. At dark, the hunters brought their catch to Coral Cove, and there on the beach, the animals were skinned and fleshed. Okay, that's kind of gruesome, and I'm sure that they were dead by then, but like there's, you know, we have processed foods now where we eat like Twinkies and all that kind of stuff. That's, you know, there's like our food now, and the food back then we had to kill animals to eat them, and they had to take the skin off and that. And if we were ever like in a deserted island, then, you know, we'd be eating things like Fifi and Sparky, believe it or not. Because we have to eat. So that's what they did in those days. We don't have to eat Sparky or Fifi anymore because we got Publix and Target. So, and all that. Well, this is kind of gross. Okay, I'm not going to go into that part right there because it's not, you don't want to hear those details. Many of our tribe went to the cliff each night to count the number killed during the day. They counted the dead otter and thought of the beads and the other things that each pelt meant. But I never went to the cove, and whenever I saw the hunters with their long spears skimming over the water, I was angry, for these animals were my friends. It was fun seeing them playing or sunning themselves among the kelp. It was more fun than the thought of beads to wear around my neck. This I told my father one morning. There are scarcely a dozen left in the beds around Coral Cove, I said. Before the alouettes came here, there were many. So they killed too many otter. Many still live in other places around the island. He replied, laughing at my foolishness. When the hunters leave, they will come back. So there'll be more coming back. They're probably hiding because of they know the hunters. There will be none left, I said. The hunters will kill them all. This morning they hunt on the south. Next week they move to another place. The ship is filled with pelts. In another week the alouettes will be ready to go. I was sure my father thought they would leave soon, for 2 days before he had sent some of our young men to the beach to build a canoe from a log which had drifted from the sea. There are no trees on the island except the small ones stunted by the wind. When the log came ashore, as happened once a long time ago, it was always carried to the village and worked on where a chance wave could not wash it away. That the men were sent to hollow out the log in the cove and to sleep beside it during the night meant that they were there to watch the alouettes, to give alarm should Captain Orlov try to sail off without paying us for the otter skins. Everyone was afraid he might, so besides the men in the cove who watched the alouette ship, others kept watch on the camp. Every hour someone brought news. Lapis said that the alouette woman spent the whole afternoon cleaning her skin aprons, which she had not done before while she had been there. Early one morning, Ramos said he had seen Captain Orlov carefully trimming his beard so that it looked the way it did when he first came. The alouettes who sharpened the long spears stopped this work and gave all their time to skinning the otter, which were brought in at dusk. We in the village of Gahalas knew that Captain Orlov was getting ready to leave the island. Would he pay us for the otter he had slain, or would he try to sneak away in the night? Sneak? What would he do? Would our men have to fight for a rightful share? These questions everyone asked while the alouettes went about their preparations. Everyone except my father, who said nothing, but each night worked on the new spear he was making. The alouettes left on a sunless day, no sun. Out of the north, deep waves rolled down upon the island. They broke against the rocks and roared into the caves, sending up white sprays of water. Before night, a storm would certainly strike. Not long after, the alouettes took down their skin tents and carried them to the beach. Captain Orlov had not paid my father for the otter he had killed. So when the news came that the hunters had packed their tents, all of our tribe left the village and hurried toward Coral Cove. The men with their weapons went first, and the women followed. The men took the trail that led to the beach, but the women hid themselves among the brush on the cliff. Ulape and I went together far out on the ledge where I had hidden before the hunters first came. The tide was low, and the rocks and the narrow beach were scattered with bundles of otter pelts. Half the hunters were on the ship. The rest were wading in the water, tossing the pelts into a boat. The alouettes laughed while they worked, as if they were happy to leave the island. My father was talking to Captain Orlov. I could not hear the words because the noise of the hunters made, but from the way my father shook his head, I knew that he was not pleased. He is angry, Ulape whispered. Not yet, I said. When he's really angry, he pulls his ear. And he's angry. The men who were working on the canoe had stopped and were watching my father, Captain Orlov. The other men of our tribe stood at the foot of the trail. The boat went off to the ship filled with otter. As it reached the ship, Captain Orlov raised his hand and gave a signal. While the boat came back, it held a black chest with which the hunters carried to the beach. Captain Orlov raised the lid and pulled out several necklaces. There was little light in the sky, yet the beads sparkled as he turned this way and that. Besides me, Ulapi threw in her breath in excitement, and I could hear cries from delight from the woman hidden in the brush. But the cries suddenly ceased as my father shook his head and turned his back on the chest. The ALOUD stood silent. Our men left their places at the foot of the trail and moved forward a few steps and waited, watching my father. One string of beads per otter pelt is not our bargain, my father said. One string and one iron spearhead, said Captain Orlov, lifting 2 fingers. The chest does not hold that much, my father answered. There are more chests on the ship, Captain Orlov, said the Russian. Then bring them to the shore, my father said. You have 105 bales of otter on the ship. There are 15 here in the cove. We will need 3 more chests of this size. Captain Orlov said something to his alouettes that I could not understand, but its meaning was soon clear. There were many hunters in the cove, and as soon as he spoke, they began to carry the otter pelts to the boat. Beside me, Ulape was scarcely breathing, like holding her breath like you are now. Do you think he will give us the other chests? She said. I do not trust them. When he gets the pelts to the ship, he may leave. It is possible. The hunters had to pass my father to reach the boat, and when the first one approached him, he stepped in his path. The rest of the pelts must stay here, he said, facing Captain Orlov, until the chests are brought. The Russian drew himself up stiffly and pointed to the clouds that were blowing hard on the island. I load the ship before the storm arrives, he said. Give us the other chests, then I will help you with your canoes, my father said. Captain Orlov was silent. His gaze moved slowly around the cove. He looked at our man standing on the ledge of the rock a dozen paces away. So a dozen paces, that's not a dozen paces like pacing back and forth, like a dozen steps, like 12 steps away, like 12 paces away. He looked upward toward the cliff and back at my father. Then he spoke to his alouettes. I do not know what happened first, whether it was my father who raised his hand against the hunter whose path he barred, whether it was this man who stepped forward with a bale of pelts on his back and shoved my father aside. It all happened so quickly that I could not tell one act from another. But as I jumped to my feet and Ulake screamed and other cries sounded along the cliff, I saw a figure laying on the rocks. It was my father, and blood was on his face. Slowly he got up on his feet. So he got hit. With their spears raised, our men rushed down across the ledge. A puff of white smoke came from the deck of the ship. The loud noise echoed the cliff. 5 of our warriors fell and lay quiet. Ulape screamed again and flung a rock onto the cove. It fell harmless against Captain Orlov. Rocks showered into the cove from many places along the cliff, striking several other hunters. Then our warriors rushed in upon them, and it was hard to tell one from the other. That was very harsh. It's like TV. It's not really happening. You know, like TV don't really happen, so it's not really happening. Ulake and I stood on the cliff and watched helplessly, afraid to use the rocks we held lest we injure our own men. The Alouettes dropped the bales of outer. They drew knives from their belts, and our warriors rushed upon them, and two lines surged back and forth along the beach. Men fell to the sand and rose to fight again. Others fell and did not get up. My father was one of these. For a long time it seemed that we would win the battle, but Captain Orlov, who had rowed off to the ship when the battle started, returned with more Alouettes. Our warriors were forced backwards to the cliffs. There were few of them left, yet they fought at the foot of the trail and would not retreat. The wind began to slow. Suddenly Captain Orlov and his Alouettes turned and ran to the boat. Our men did not pursue them. The hunters reached the ship, and red sails went up, and the ship moved slowly between the two rocks that guard the cove. Once more, before it disappeared, a white puff of smoke rose from the deck. As Ulapi and I ran along a cliff, a rolling sound like a great